In 1757, a corporate trading company with just a few thousand mercenaries basically managed to buy out the wealthiest province in the world.
Right, which is just wild to think about.
Yeah, and by 1857, that exact same board of directors effectively owned the entire Indian subcontinent.
I mean, it is easily one of the most absurd and ruthless corporate acquisitions in human
Oh,
history.
absolutely.
You have a private company going from, managing spice warehouses to suddenly commanding massive standing armies
Mhm.
and dictating the fate of millions of people.
So if you are looking at your exam syllabus right now, you are probably staring at the timeline of the expansion of British power in India, right, from 1757 to 1857.
Yeah, and wondering how on earth you're supposed to memorize that chaotic spreadsheet.
Exactly. It feels like a total minefield of dates, confusing treaties, and governor generals who all sound identical.
They really do. And if you take one wrong step, like if you mix up your Anglo-Mysore treaties with your Anglo-Maratha treaties, you've just lost your marks.
So to survive that minefield, you need a mental map. You can't just, memorize this stuff geographically or randomly.
No, definitely not. You have to understand the causal chain, like how one event literally funded or forced the next one to happen.
Right, which is why today we are pulling from the Spectrum Modern History, Civil's Daily previous year questions, and P&P notes to essentially build you an audio flashcard.
We are stripping away all the fluff, just focusing purely on high-yield PYQ-driven facts.
Yes, the exact sequence of battles, the treaties, the policies, and those governor generals that trapped test takers every single year.
And to anchor this whole deep dive, we are going to look at this century of expansion through three really distinct pillars: wars, treaties, and policies.
Wars, treaties, and policies. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, keep those three pillars in mind, because the strict chronological flow of how the East India Company became a pan-India dominant power, it's actually a very logical progression.
So let's jump right into the foundation phase, 1757 to 1765.
Perfect place to start.
We kick off with the Battle of Plassey in 1757. On paper, it's Nawab Siraj-ud-Dowlah up against Robert Clive.
Right.
And the immediate spark is just the British misusing trade privileges and fortifying Calcutta without the Nawab's permission.
That's the official excuse, yeah.
But, I mean, calling Plassey a battle feels like a massive historical exaggeration. It seems more like an elaborate bribe.
It was absolutely an elaborate bribe, and the exam setters loved to test your understanding of this exact point.
Because it wasn't a real military win.
Exactly, it was a political coup. The British won before a single shot really mattered, because they orchestrated the betrayal of the Nawab's own commander.
Mir Jafar.
Right, Mir Jafar. It was one with banknotes and backdoor diplomacy, not actual battlefield tactics.
Okay, so Plassey gives the British the keys to the back door. They get access to the insane wealth of Bengal, but they don't have absolute sovereignty yet.
Not yet, no.
Right, so if Plassey was the backdoor coup, the Battle of Buxar in 1764 was the actual, real military test.
Buxar was the real watershed moment, because all that wealth the British siphoned from Bengal after Plassey, that allowed them to build up their military forces.
Right, they bought an army.
Exactly. So by 1764, they actually faced a formidable triple alliance. You had the dethroned Mir Qasim, Shuja-ud-Dowlah of Awadh, and the Mughal emperor himself, Shah Alam II.
And they went up against the British forces led by Hector Munro.
Yes. And the British won decisively.
Which is huge. I mean, defeating the actual Mughal emperor fundamentally changes the game.
Totally. It proves they aren't just sneaky merchants anymore. They have genuine military superiority in eastern India.
And that win instantly translates into our second pillar, which is treaties, specifically the Treaty of Allahabad in 1765.
Right, orchestrated by Robert Clive. And this treaty is a major, major focal point for the exam.
Because of the Diwani rights.
Yes. The British secure the Diwani rights, which is the legal right to collect revenue for both Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha, directly from the Mughal emperor.
But crucially, look at what they do with Awadh here. They obviously decide not to annex it.
Right, which seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, they deliberately keep Awadh intact as a buffer state, basically to absorb any shocks from Maratha or Afghan invasions coming from the west.
It was a very calculated move.
But wait, let's look at the mechanics of Bengal for a second.
Yeah.
You have a trading company that suddenly has the legal right to collect taxes from this massive populous region overnight.
Which is a logistical nightmare.
Right. So I'm looking at this dual government system they set up from 1765 to 1772. The phrasing in the notes is really specific here.
Yeah, the company held the Diwani, the revenue rights.
Right, meaning they had power without responsibility. And the local Nawab retained the Nizamat, which is the administration and police.
Meaning responsibility without power.
Exactly. But if I'm the Nawab and I still control the police, why don't I just use my police force to arrest the British tax collectors and, take my country back?
Well, because the Nawab's police force was completely defanged, and his administration was starved of cash.
Because the British held the purse strings.
Exactly. You cannot run an army or a police force without paying them.
Hmm.
Plus, part of the arrangement was that the Nawab relied on British troops for external defense.
So the company had the money and the heavy artillery.
Right. And the Nawab was just left holding the bag for any domestic failures. If the roads fell apart or like when a massive famine hit in 1770 and wiped out a huge portion of Bengal's population.
The British could just shrug and blame the Nawab's administration.
Precisely. It is an incredibly cynical setup.
Yeah, they just bleed the region dry and take zero accountability. The corruption actually got so bad that the British Parliament forced Warren Hastings to abolish the system in 1772.
Right, taking direct responsibility for both revenue and administration. And that centralization under Hastings really makes the foundation in Bengal rock solid.
Because the company now has an entire nation's GDP at its disposal.
Exactly. And what does a corporation do with a sudden massive cash flow?
They expand.
They expand. They build a massive standing army. But an army's expensive. If it isn't fighting and conquering, it's just draining profits.
Which brings us perfectly to our core section, expansion via wars. Once Bengal is secure, they look south and west.
Right, triggering decades of conflict.
Right.
Let's trace the causal chain, starting with the Anglo-Mysore Wars in the south.
Okay, 4 distinct phases here.
And you need a strict template for these wars for the exam. You have to track the years, the shifting alliances, and the specific treaties.
So the first Anglo-Mysore War runs from 1767 to 1769. The British try to build an alliance with the Marathas and the Nizam of Hyderabad to crush Hyder Ali of Mysore.
Right, a 3-on-1 fight.
But how does Hyder Ali even survive that? It seems impossible.
Well, he doesn't just survive it, he actually flips it. Hyder Ali uses brilliant diplomacy. He basically buys off the Marathas with cash and promises the Nizam some territory.
Oh, wow. So he isolates the British.
Completely.
Yeah.
And the outcome is the Treaty of Madras in 1769, which is basically a defensive pact that humiliates the company.
But peace doesn't last long. The Second War breaks out in 1780 and goes until 1784.
Right. And the immediate cause here is the British capturing Mahe. It was a French port on the Malabar coast that Hyder Ali considered under his protection.
And this war is notable because Hyder Ali actually dies mid-conflict, right? In 1782.
Yes, and his son, Tipu Sultan, takes command. The war kind of grinds to a stalemate and ends with the Treaty of Mangalore in 1784.
Where both sides just agree to return whatever territories they conquered.
Exactly. Just a draw.
Then we hit the Third War, 1790 to 1792. Tipu Sultan goes up against Lord Cornwallis, and this time it is not a stalemate.
No, Tipu is decisively defeated, which leads to the highly punitive Treaty of Seringapatam in 1792.
That's the really harsh one, right?
Very harsh. Tipu is forced to hand over half his territory, pay a massive financial indemnity, and this is crazy surrender, 2 of his sons as hostages to the British.
Wow. Which just sets the stage for the final showdown, the Fourth War in 1799.
Right, because Lord Wellesley arrives in India as Governor General, and he is a total uncompromising imperialist.
So Tipu Sultan is killed in battle defending his capital.
Yes. And the core of Mysore is subsequently handed back to the old Hindu Wodeyar dynasty, but under a strict subsidiary alliance.
Which is a policy we will break down in just a minute.
Definitely. But first, let's highlight the explicit PYQ trap here, the treaty sequence.
Oh, right. They ask you to order the Mysore treaties chronological.
All the time. So your memory hook is Madras, then Mangalore, then Seringapatam.
Madras, Mangalore, Seringapatam.
Got it.
So by 1799, the South is neutralized. The company has this huge battle-tested army and no immediate enemy down south.
So they look right next door to central India, where the Maratha Confederacy is fracturing internally.
Bringing us to the Anglo-Maratha Wars. 3 phases for this one.
Right. Now, the first Anglo-Maratha War happens a bit earlier, from 1775 to 1782.
And the immediate cause is a succession dispute, right? Raghunathrao gets greedy and asks for British military aid to become the Peshwa.
Exactly. It turns into this long, messy, totally inconclusive conflict that eventually ends with the Treaty of Salbai in 1782.
But wait, why is the Treaty of Salbai considered so strategically important if the war itself was just a messy draw?
Because of what it allowed the British to do elsewhere. Salbai guaranteed 20 years of peace between the company and the Marathas.
Oh, I see. A strategic pause.
Right. It let the British focus all their military resources on fighting Mysore without worrying about getting attacked by the Marathas from behind.
That makes sense. But that 20-year pause ends with the Second Anglo-Maratha War, 1803 to 1805. Wellesley is still Governor General.
Yes. And the cause, again, is internal Maratha division. The Peshwa signs the Treaty of Bassein in 1802 with the British.
Basically trading his independence for British protection.
Exactly. And the other major Maratha chiefs, primarily Scindia and Bansal, view this as a complete surrender of Maratha sovereignty.
So they rebel against the treaty.
They do. And the British systematically defeat them, forcing them to sign their own subsidiary treaties, the Treaty of Surchianjengon and the Treaty of Devgon.
Leaving the Maratha Confederacy deeply fractured.
Very deeply. Which brings the final nail in the coffin. The Third Anglo-Maratha War, 1817 to 1819.
Now, the trigger mentioned in the sources here is the menace of the Pindaris. Who exactly were the Pindaris and why did they cause a whole war?
Good question. The Pindaris were essentially bands of disbanded soldiers and irregular mercenaries. They roamed central India after the previous wars, engaging in massive plunder.
And Lord Hastings, the new Governor-General, launches a campaign to wipe them out.
Right, and the British basically accused the Marathas of sheltering these Pindaris.
Which was really just a pretext for annexation.
Exactly. The Maratha chiefs realized this was the endgame and tried one last coordinated push for independence. But they were completely crushed.
So the Peshwa is defeated, stripped of his title, and pensioned off. The Maratha Confederacy is formally dissolved.
That's right. So the south is secured, central India is secured. The only major power left standing is in the north.
The Anglo-Sikh Wars. 2 phases here. And the context is that for decades, this really powerful Maharaja Ranjit Singh just held the British at bay.
He really did. He had a modernized, incredibly strong military.
But then he dies in 1839. So what happens next?
Just complete political chaos. Without his iron grip, the Sikh empire falls into severe succession crises.
Right.
And the powerful Khalsa army becomes really unruly, acting almost like an independent political force. Mutual mistrust just skyrockets as the British start massing troops along the Sutlej River.
And that tension sparks the First Anglo-Sikh War, 1845 to 1846. The Khalsa army crosses the Sutlej. But reading the notes, it feels like we see a recurring theme from Plassey here.
Treachery from within.
Yeah.
The Sikh soldiers fought fiercely, but their top commanders, like Lal Singh, actively betrayed them. They passed information to the British and literally abandoned their troops on the battlefield.
Man, that's brutal. And that internal sabotage leads to British victories, culminating in the Treaty of Lahore in 1846.
Right. The Sikhs are forced to pay a massive indemnity, cede crucial territory, and most importantly, accept a British resident stationed in Lahore.
So they essentially lose their absolute independence.
They do. And then the Second Anglo-Sikh War erupts almost immediately from 1848 to 1849. The trigger this time is a localized revolt by Mulraj, the governor of Multan.
But what starts as a local rebellion just explodes into a full-scale war.
Yeah. And the man in charge now is Lord Dalhousie, who is perhaps the most aggressive expansionist of them all.
Right. Because after the decisive Battle of Gujarat, Dalhousie doesn't even bother with puppet rulers or new treaties. He just completely annexes the Punjab in 1849.
He just merges the Sikh Empire directly into British India.
Wow. Okay, so as we transition from the wars to our third pillar, policies, something becomes really apparent to me. Wars are just incredibly expensive and unpredictable.
Very.
It seems like the British realized they needed a cheaper way to conquer. They basically turned paperwork into weapons.
Oh, absolutely. Diplomacy and administrative policies proved just as lethal to Indian sovereignty as cannons. They institutionalized dominance.
Like, when I look at the mechanics of Wellesley's subsidiary alliance, it operates almost exactly like a mafia protection racket.
That is a great way to describe it.
Right. It's like, nice little kingdom you got here. Be a shame if someone invaded it. Just pay us and we'll protect you.
The mechanics align perfectly with that. Here is the core concept you must remember for the exam. An Indian ruler agrees to disband their own native army.
Okay.
In return, they accept British troops permanently stationed inside their territory, supposedly for their protection.
Okay.
But the ruler is forced to pay for the maintenance of those British troops.
And they lose control over their foreign affairs.
Exactly. They completely lose it. They cannot make alliances or declare war without explicit British permission.
It's just a brilliant, highly sinister mechanism. The British get to maintain this massive standing army across the whole subcontinent, and the Indian princes are footing the bill.
And if a prince falls behind on the payments, the company just confiscates a chunk of their territory.
Unbelievable.
It expanded British dominance while shifting the entire financial burden onto the subjugated states. The key examples to track for the exam. Hyderabad was the first state forced into it in 1798.
Then Mysore followed in 1799 after Tipu Sultan's death.
Right. And Wawad was coerced into signing in 1801.
So that's Wellesley's racket. Decades later, Lord Dalhousie introduces his own paperwork weapon, the doctrine of lapse.
Yes.
Now, this feels a bit different than a mafia racket. It feels more like a bank repossessing a house based on a technicality hidden on, like, page 40 of a mortgage contract.
That is a very precise way to look at it. The doctrine of lapse is a masterpiece of legalistic, bloodless annexation.
How exactly did it work?
The rule was simple. If the ruler of a dependent state dies without a natural biological male heir, the state laxes, meaning the sovereignty reverts directly to the British East India Company.
But wait, adoption is a deeply rooted, centuries-old tradition in Indian royal succession? If a king didn't have a biological son, he just adopted one to inherit the throne.
True, but Dalhousie simply refused to recognize that tradition. He strictly rejected the right of adopted heirs to inherit political power. Through this single legal loophole, he swallowed up huge territories without firing a single shot. The crucial sequence of states annexed under the doctrine of lapse is Satara in 1848, Jhansi in 1853, and Nagpur in 1854.
Okay, let me stop you right there, because I'm looking at the exam notes, and there is a massive trap flashing in neon lights here regarding Dalhousie, the Awad exception.
Yes. Whenever you sit in the exam hall, do not let them trick you into linking Awad with the doctrine of lapse.
Awad was annexed in 1856 by Dalhousie, but it was not annexed via the doctrine of lapse.
Because the Nawab of Awad had plenty of biological heirs. The lapse technicality just wouldn't work.
So what did Dalhousie do?
He pivoted. He annexed Awad under the pretext of misgovernance. The British claimed the Nawab was running the state into the ground, and therefore the company had a moral obligation to step in.
Ah, for the good of the people.
Exactly. It's a classic PYQ trap. Misgovernance for Awad, doctrine of lapse for Satara, Jhansi, and Nagpur.
Good to know. Okay, before we move to the final drill, let's do a rapid hit of regional annexations just to complete the geographical borders.
Let's do it.
We already noted Punjab was annexed by Dalhousie in 1849. What about the West?
Sindh. It was annexed in 1843 by Sir Charles Napier under the Governor-Generalship of Lord Ellenborough.
Right. The British basically provoked a conflict there just to secure their western frontier after a disaster in the First Afghan War.
Exactly. So just remember, Sindh in 1843, Punjab in 1849, Awad in 1856.
Okay, take a breath. We have covered a century of complex history. It is time for the rapid revision sprint.
My favorite part.
We are going to lock in these memory chains so that when you see these names on the test, your brain instantly connects the dots. No second guessing. Ready?
Ready. Let's run it.
Chain 1, the timeline. Plassey in 1757, Buxar in 1764, Allahabad in 1765. What does that equal?
That equals the control of Bengal. Plassey was the backdoor coup. Buxar was the actual military victory. And Allahabad was the legal paperwork securing the revenue.
Chain 2, the wars. We look south to Mysore, we look central to the Marathas, we look north to the Sikhs. What's the result?
Pan-India dominance. By defeating those three major regional powers sequentially, utilizing the resources from one to fight the next, no native state could challenge the British militarily.
Chain 3, the Governor-General mix-up trap. Do not cross the streams here. Wellesley equals what? And Dalhousie equals what?
Wellesley equals the subsidiary alliance. He's the one demanding you disband your army and pay for British troops. Dalhousie equals the doctrine of lapse and outright annexations. He's taking the throne if you don't have a biological heir.
Spot on. Last one, chain 4, the treaty traps. We have Madras, Mangalore, Seringapatam.
Those are the Anglo-Mysore war treaties in strict chronologic order. First, second, third wars.
And Salbai Basain?
Those belong to the Marathas. Salba ended the first war and bought 20 years of strategic peace. Basain triggered the second war because the Peshwa compromised Maratha independence.
Awesome. If you can keep those chains linked in your head, these frameworks are your absolute key to logical elimination in the exam. Absolutely.
You won't have to guess. You will just know that Wellesley doesn't belong with the Sikh Wars, or that Buxar is the real military victory, not Plassey.
You know, if we connect all these isolated exam facts back to the bigger picture, there is a really fascinating final paradox to ponder here.
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, we just spent this time detailing the ruthless drive of the British to extract wealth, right?
Yeah.
We looked at their use of mafia-like alliances and manipulation of treaties to control the subcontinent. They imposed a unified administration, standardized laws, and centralized military policies purely for their own imperial benefit, just to make extraction easier.
Right, and in doing so, they essentially forced all these disparate warring kingdoms and confederacies into one massive administrative bloc.
And that is the paradox. In their relentless pursuit of control, the British unwittingly forged the exact unified geopolitical entity, the very concept of a modern India that would eventually possess the collective consciousness needed to kick them out a century later.
Wow. They built the borders and the infrastructure of their own demise.
Exactly.
They essentially built the skeleton of the modern nation just so they could put it in a cage. Take these memory chains, remember the frameworks, and go dominate your test.